Hey guys, hello and welcome to Naveed for Speed. In today's video, I am going to be showing you this car right here. Now you might not have heard about this car. It's the Skywell BE11. It's another Chinese electric car. And we're seeing a lot of Chinese electric cars come out recently. We're talking obviously BYD, but there's JQ and Amoda, and there's so many Chinese brands nowadays, and it's hard to make sense of it all. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you around the Skywell BE11. I'm going to be showing you the exterior of the car, I'm going to be showing you the interior of the car, and I'm going to be taking it out on a drive to show you exactly what it feels like. But before we go out on a drive, let me show you the exterior of the car. We'll start at the front here because you'll notice first and foremost this badge here. Obviously this is a new brand, Skywell. They've been in China since 2017. They started off by making commercial vehicles and now they're making passenger cars as well. This is the first car to come to the UK, and you'll notice this logo is in the shape of a W, which is the middle letter of the word Skywell. When we go to the back of the car, you'll be able to see that lettering on the rear light bar, and I'll show you that. But yeah, this is supposed to be, it's supposed to also be in the shape of a magnet, and it's also supposed to be in the shape of a shield. So that's the meaning behind this badge. And I think it does actually look quite interesting. You've got these razor LED headlights along the side over here. It all looks pretty decent. I mean, it's quite angular at the front, and the rest of the car is a little bit homogeneous. There's not really many bold shapes to the car. It's, I mean, it looks a little bit like general electric cars that you'll get nowadays, but I think the front does look a little bit sharp. To me, it seems almost like a Honda and a Polestar. If they had a baby, this is what it would look like. You'll notice here on the side, you've got these what look like vents, this sort of air curtain, but it's actually not. There's no, air can't go through there, it's closed off. So that's a little bit of a fake. But I think generally the front of the car looks good. If we move towards the side of the car, I'll show you these wheels. So you get this car in 19-inch alloy wheels. These Lynx alloy wheels is what they're called. They've got this diamond cut surface on the front, and I think they do look really cool, except the fact that they're sitting on these Gitty tires. I've never heard of that brand. And I'll tell you a little bit about how this car feels on the road, particularly with these tires, because you can lose traction quite easily in this car. A little bit more on that when I take it out to drive. As we keep coming further towards the side of the car, you'll notice some chrome features around the windows. You'll notice all this plastic at the bottom here. Now, the reason why Skywell have done that is because they want this car to be a little bit more outdoorsy, a little bit more adventurous. You're probably going to take it somewhere light off-roading. It's good to have that protection. At the top, you've got silver roof rails as well. Now, the entire car is around 4.7 meters long. So inside, that should mean you get decent legroom. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I take you inside the car. But you'll also notice here, you've got rear privacy glass. Now, interesting to note, with the Skywell BE11, you only get one trim level, but you can get two batteries. So everything that you see in this car comes as standard between the smaller 72 kilowatt hour battery or the larger 86 kilowatt hour battery. And there's obviously a difference in the range as well. The larger 86 kilowatt hour battery will get you just over 300 miles of range combined. And in the city, it's claimed to get you up to 400 miles of range. Whereas the 72 kilowatt hour battery should get you around 250 combined and around 300 around the city. I'm not entirely sure that it could match those figures. My experience is slightly different, but I still think it is reasonably respectable in its class. Let's go further towards the back of the car, because over here, first and foremost, you'll notice this sort of spoiler, which is supposed to add to a bit more of a sporty, adventurous, outdoorsy kind of vibe to the car. And it's got this sort of plastic trim around it as well. It looks decent. You'll notice this rear light bar, this big rear light bar. Now, light bars are the way nowadays when it comes to particularly electric cars. You'll notice it kind of, this rear end kind of reminds me a little bit of the BYD CLU DMI or other cars like that. So I think generally, again, it's not too bold in its design, but it's everything you need, I suppose, isn't it? Down here, you can see this skid plate. Again, it's supposed to be for that adventure. If you are going a little bit off-road, which I'm not sure how much off-roading this car can take because it is only front-wheel drive, but that's there to protect the underside of the car. I'll just open the boot now, which I should be able to do using my foot. And every time I've done that, it has worked first time. So here is the rear boot space. I'll just move this parcel shelf out the way a little bit so you can see this boot space. You get a nice big opening. I'm actually really surprised of this opening. It's easy to get things in and out of the car, particularly larger items. The boot space is 467 liters of boot space, which is it's average for its class. I mean, cars like the Skoda Enyaq, cars like the BMW iX3, they've got a lot more space than this. So it is a lot, it is purely average, but I think it's decent. When you put the rear seats down, that rear bench of seats, you get 1,100 or just under 1,200 liters of boot space. Now that is behind on its competitors, but I think that's because those rear seats don't fully go down. I'll just very quickly try that and show you exactly what that's like. Let me move some stuff out of the way. So if I put these rear seats down, that's as far as they go. They're not going any further than that. So that's probably why you don't get a lot of boot space when you put those rear seats down. So that's a bit of a negative point, I think. Obviously, you got charging cables down here. Let's see what's underneath the floor. Yeah, you don't get space underneath the floor either. But you do get this sort of plastic skid plate, very hard scratchy plastic, so if you are going to drag stuff over it, it's going to scratch quite easily. And you get a 12-volt socket over here to plug stuff in, which you might not be able to see very well. So there's that. But anyway, let me show you the inside of the car, because it's quite interesting. Upon first glance, the Skywell BE11 actually looks quite nice, particularly the interior. You've got a load of materials, including leather, like here on the steering wheel, gloss black. You've got Alcantara here on the doors. You've got this wood material, which extends along the door, all along the dashboard here as well. Now, the wood looks quite nice, but when you start to feel it, it does look a little bit fake. You've got this sort of dark chrome which runs along the door and these door handles. I think that actually looks really quite nice. But you'll see certain elements of this car which seem to be inspired by other cars. So for example, this center console area over here, this reminds me of Mercedes, as do these switches over here in the center console as well. But I think otherwise it looks quite nice. You've got gloss black and all these other materials. Let me tell you how it feels. So I'll start with the seats, because the seats have this leather and this Alcantara in there. The seats are really quite nice, supportive. They are relatively firm, so I feel like when you're driving along, they are going to support your body really well. They're not too wide or not too thin so that they're squeezing you. I think the seats are really lovely, and they're 6-way electronically adjustable, particularly for the driver. I've not been in the passenger seat, so I'm not particularly sure about that, but you get a reasonable view. I'll tell you a little bit more about the driving position when I take you out on the road. The steering wheel here is leather with this contrasting stitching over here, and you've got gloss black in here, and you've got sort of gloss black features that can get fingerprints and marks on them, and they really easily show dirt. But I think the steering wheel itself looks really quite nice. You've got these switches over here. These sort of you can't. They look like they're gonna. You can scroll them, but you can't. You just flick them up or down like so. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how that comes into play with the infotainment system. In front of the driver, you get a 12.3-inch digital display, which I think looks really cool. It shows you a load of different features, like it could tell you what radio station you're on, it could tell you your tire pressures, and obviously it could tell you your speed and how much energy you're using. I think it looks really quite good. That is quite convincing, because I don't really like cars that have smaller instrument clusters. I think that's really decent. Let me talk about the infotainment screen over here, because you got this screen which sometimes I've started to get a bit frustrated with, because in order to listen to, for example, DAB, you have to click here and then it'll start playing DAB. So I'll just put the volume up and you'll be able to hear a little bit about that. But when I exit it, it just turns itself off. I'd like that to continue to stay on. Another thing which I don't like, I mean, it's not the most intuitive. To me, this looks a little bit like a Windows homepage, and you have to try and click through different things. But you've got some apps over here. The navigation doesn't actually work. I think later cars probably will get navigation. So you got this Turbo Dog 9 system, which I can't get rid of, and this other map. The map data is not found on the device. So I do believe that we are going to get maps in the future, but right now you don't. Another thing that I'm not a fan of with the screen is it's quite bright at times, particularly at night. But then when you click certain things like your settings, it goes really dark. So there's a big contrast in between the different brightnesses. And you can change the brightness. You can put the brightness up or down. But when you do, for example, from here somewhere, but when you do put the brightness down, then this becomes okay, but then the settings becomes really dark. So I think that's not been executed really well. Let me tell you about the volume control, because I've been driving this car for almost a week and I still don't know how to change the volume using the screen. I know you have to go through so many different settings. Maybe you have to go through the settings in here, sound and display, and then you put the volume up and down from there. So there's a few buttons that you have to go through. But I've been changing the volume using these scroller buttons over here. So if I click it up once, that changes it from 0 to 1. And sometimes it changes it from 0 straight to 2. And if that is the case, then it ends up being quite loud for you to talk to your passengers. And the only way that I've managed to get around that is if I go to settings, sound and display, and I change the sound field settings and put the sound coming all the way from the back of the car. Then what I can do is if I change the volume, then it doesn't have much of an effect in terms of it can still be nice and quiet in the back of the car, the sound coming from there, and you can still have a conversation with your passengers. So that's one thing to know. But otherwise, I think this interior, in terms of the storage, you get decent storage area here. You've also got a glove box over here, which is reasonable size, and the door bins are decent as well. You can fit a couple of bottles in there if you wanted to. So overall, I think the cabin itself is convincing. It looks the part and to some extent feels the part. But let's see how that feels when we take it out on the road to drive, because so far this car looks like it is fit for purpose. It is an attractive car to buy in terms of for customers, for people with families. You've got decent practicality. You've got a long range, relatively long range. You've got decent battery size. I do have to mention price, and I do have to mention charging. One thing that I haven't mentioned about this interior cabin is the amount of light that's coming in. Right now I'm facing towards the sun and I feel like there's loads of light coming in this cabin, but I can understand that at certain times it might feel like it's quite dark in here, particularly with this dark interior. But one thing you do get is this sunroof over here, which I think is really quite cool. You can open it from here and it extends all the way to the rear cabin. I mean, you can see how long it's actually taken. That's how large it is. And then I have to click it again once it goes halfway for it to continue all the way to the rear. So now you've got this really big sunroof over here, which lets loads of light to the front and the rear cabin. I'll tell you a little bit more about how that feels in the rear cabin, but you can also open this sunroof as well. So if I click this button over here, you can open that fully too, which you can't necessarily do that in many cars that have a large panoramic sunroof like that. So I think that's quite convenient, a bit of a selling point for this car if you value that. The rear cabin seems like a decent place to be as well. There's loads of leg room back here for rear passengers. You can stretch your legs out, and there's a little pouch over here that you can put stuff behind the front seats. Headroom isn't an issue back here as well, particularly if you're sitting on the sides and the outer seats, because I'm 5'11" and I've got loads of headroom over here. And you've got, like I mentioned, loads of light coming in through the sunroof. So I think that's really quite nice. One thing that I do have to mention is the floor does seem a little bit high compared to the seat. So you are going to have to be sat with your knees up like this. But it is quite convenient that the middle passenger doesn't have a transmission tunnel to deal with. So you could probably fit 3 adult passengers back here reasonably well. I would imagine you can. You've got an armrest over here with cup holders in there. So I think if you had 2 passengers back here, they would have loads of room. And again, I think that's a selling point of this car. On paper, this car seems really nice with the practicality and the passenger space, for example. Remember I told you about that wheelbase? Well, that's translated really well into the car. I do have to mention down here, you get some USB sockets to charge devices, for example, and you get a 220 volt 3-pin socket over here as well. So you can plug stuff into there. So if you need to use that, that's quite convenient for rear passengers. So I think overall, the rear passenger space should be quite pleasant. Let's take this car out on the road now, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how this car feels to drive, because it is quite interesting. So let me tell you what it's like to drive the Skywell BE11. Well, there might be something which you might notice straight away, but is immediately apparent to me, is as I'm driving now at around 40 miles an hour, I can start to hear wind noise. There is quite a considerable amount of wind noise, so much so that sometimes it could be quite difficult to speak to passengers. So there does need to be a little bit of refinement there, I think. In terms of acceleration, how it feels to accelerate, immediately as you set off, as you put your foot down on the accelerator, no matter how hard you do it, there's always a slight delay before the car gets going. Now, this car does feel like it is built more towards comfort, so the ride is a little bit more floaty, it's a little bit more soft, I think, is the best way to describe it. But that obviously translates to a more sensible driving experience. That's why I believe when you put your foot on the accelerator, it doesn't accelerate straight away. But because that ride is a little bit more floaty, what it means is that when you go into corners, when you go into bends, the car does lean a little bit, and it's noticeable amounts of lean. And so because of that, that's why I mentioned the seats. The seats are relatively supportive for that. So that's a positive in terms of the seats. The steering is quite numb, to be honest. The steering wheel, you don't necessarily get a sense which way the wheels are facing. So sometimes you might have to judge as you're going into corners, and then you might have to judge again in terms of, okay, I need to adjust my steering angle. So that's there. I do, however, like the brakes. The brakes are quite strong. So when I do put my foot on the brakes, I do get quite a lot of stopping power when I'm trying to stop, but they are still a little bit difficult to understand. Now, you can change the steering wheel mode and the brakes mode to a more sporty mode. In terms of the steering wheel, I don't know, I didn't feel like it did much. The brakes makes it a little bit more harder to modulate, to feel them and get a sense of how much braking you're putting in, but they are still really effective. Whilst we're on the subject of steering, actually, I've got the steering in comfort mode at the moment, and I'm just about to get onto a bit of a straight stretch here, and I'll show you something. If you have a look at the steering wheel, watch this. If I do this, that's how much play there is in the steering wheel, and I'm still going straight here. I'm not. Now you can feel a little bit like I'm moving, but if I do it this much, it's staying straight. So there's a bit of play in the steering wheel. As I'm looking around out of this car, I do have a relatively good visibility. Out of the front, I've got a decent driving position. I'm sat quite high up. I can see the bonnet, and the bonnet seems to slope down a little bit at the front, so I can actually see a decent amount of road in front of me. Looking all around me, I've got a good view out the sides. Wing mirrors are quite large, you can see there. Got a really good view out of the sides, and reasonable view out of the rear. Over the shoulder visibility is not the best because of those tinted windows at the back, and the pillars at the back as well are quite thick. So you might not get big visibility out of over your shoulder, but you do get big wing mirrors. But overall, in terms of comfort, I think in terms of the driving experience, this is not necessarily a car that's sporty. It's not necessarily a car that you're going to want to take out on a weekend, for example, to blast around in the countryside, for example. It's not going to be the most enjoyable drive. I think what Skywell are trying to do here is appeal to customers in terms of the price, appeal to customers in terms of the practicality what you get. So let me talk about the price. Now, the price for the 72 kilowatt hour battery version of this car is around £37,000, and for this 86 kilowatt hour battery version that I have, it's just £5 off £40,000. So it's relatively on the high side for what you feel like you're getting, and it competes with some of the more established brands like cars like the brands like Kia and Skoda. So, you know, generally I think customers might feel like, why should I go for an unknown brand like this when there are more established brands like that? But I think, like I say, on paper, if you're looking for a car that has a relatively good practicality but is at a lesser price, then this might be a car for you. But I think, if anything, it's a good starting point for Skywell, I know you got Chinese brands like BYD who are here and are established and have a very well-refined product. Skywell seems like this product isn't that refined yet. It might just be the early stages. We are going to see more things coming from the brand. We are going to see more features like the satellite navigation. So I think as a foundation, it's a good starting point. And I think this won't be the end of this brand. I wonder how well they're going to do in terms of sales, because I don't think this car is as attractive as it looks like it is on paper. But I think it probably still will sell a reasonable amount, enough to allow the company to do more work here in the UK and sell, bring more models here. I think they're really strong on trying to push this car in different markets around the world. In some markets, it's called the Skywell EV6, or there's a few different names of this car. So they've just sort of rebranded that car. But I do have to mention, this car doesn't have ADAS. It doesn't have the advanced driver assist system. So you are having to rely on yourself a little bit more. But I think the future cars will probably have all that. I don't know if you can tell, maybe you might be able to see in that camera, you can see a little bit of the interior ambient lighting, which has just changed to red just now, but it does change color occasionally. And if I brake really hard, yeah, it did change color a little bit there. So there is interior ambient lighting, which looks really good in the dark. I might try and put a video over this in the dark, but otherwise, let me try and stop for a second, and I will try and show you that traction. So I've just stopped for a second to show you what I was talking about in terms of that traction. I'm at a junction and I'm gonna accelerate out of this junction and I'm gonna turn right. So as I accelerate and I turn my wheel, you heard that. I mean, that is quite apparent that the front wheels just started turning there. They just lit up, and that was because I was at a turn, and it's a relatively dry day today. But if it was a wet day, then right now, as I'm driving along this road, I could probably do that as well on a wet day, on a damp day rather. But that was on a dry day. Starting to smell a little bit of that rubber now as I did that turn. But it can be quite alarming when you do that. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that when you are accelerating, if you are accelerating out into traffic, for example, that you really take your time and you make sure that you have enough time to get in. So there's just that sort of forward planning. You just change the way that you drive a little bit, but you just got to be a little bit sensible. As you're driving along, you can hear that electric motor whirring away. You can hear that whine, especially as you're at higher speeds and you just stay at constant speeds, because you can hear that whine noise. So I think overall, what can I say about this car? Well, I feel like this isn't the final product. I feel like this product does need to be refined a little bit. But I think it's a good starting point. It's a good foundation, because they've got a load of things that are important to customers, things that are important to families, things that are important to the general public. Those sort of things they've got established really well in this car. And I think in the future, I hope that they can improve on some of the features which aren't really good, some of the features which haven't been executed really well, and I hope that they're able to improve. But I don't think we've seen the last of the Skywell brand here in the UK. But we are certainly seeing more and more Chinese electric cars. So are the Chinese taking over? Well, yes and no. In every sort of industry, from every sort of market, you are going to see some of the good brands, and you're going to see some people that sort of totally hit the mark. This does seem like it is going towards one of the brands that hasn't quite got it right. But in terms of Chinese electric vehicles, I think just the fact that this car exists shows that Chinese brands are here and they are doing well, and it means that more Chinese brands are wanting to follow suit. So I think we just have to accept that the Chinese brands are here, and sometimes they provide good value for you, but maybe not quite this one right now. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you and take care.